The circle, it's a very simple design, very elegant, yet if you've ever tried to stitch a perfect circle, it can be very challenging. I'd like to show you how to create an elegant evening bag using a satin stitch or decorative stitch. The intertwining circles were effortless to stitch. To create it, I used the winning combination, the circular sewing attachment and Baby Lock's Symphony machine. I love creating with fabric and thread and unique designs, and when I was introduced to Baby Lock's circular sewing attachment, I knew that the bag was a perfect palette for this accessory. If you've ever tried to stitch circles without an attachment, you know they're very difficult to get perfectly symmetrical. These circles are that way. They're symmetrical, they can be appliqued, just stitched with decorative stitches, satin stitches. A little bit can go a long way. And to use this, as I mentioned, the circular sewing attachment has many components included in the box. This is the key portion. It's the circular attachment. Attaches to your machine with the screws, and you have specialty feet that you can use. There's a pivot pin that holds the fabric to the attachment. You're going to use your favorite thread. I'm using Madeira's rayon thread. Choose a variety of colors and use the bobbin fill, lightweight embroidery thread for the bobbin. The portion that we're going to discuss right now is working with a template. The template really is a design feature that helps you determine where the circles are going to be placed, what size they are. This shows a fourth of the circle. And to really get an idea of the sizes that are available to you, you may want to do a test stitching. I used the fashion fabric that I used in the bag, and the first thing I did was to test out a few of the circles, not all of them. They start at 30 millimeters and go to 130. And I tested fabric, as you can see, the fabric color, thread colors, and decorative stitches. Now, decorative stitches work well, but not the satin filled-in stitches. The light area utility stitches are my favorite to use, and on this fabric I simply marked the different sizes so that I could use this information in the design process. Testing out thread colors, you can see that obviously this was too much of a match, so you can use a variety, do a lot of testing for both size and color. Now when it comes to your pattern, first of all, you're going to cut out your pattern, and I'm working with Clover's Trace and Create templates, a bag template, the City Bag collection. I designed these for Clover. There are 6 different bag variations, and I'm going to use version B. It's colored in all blue, so I'm going to trace this onto the wrong side of my fabric. Speaking of the fabric, it's a silk or silk-like fabric, very lightweight, so to give it some weight and stability, I fused on a lightweight interfacing. And then from the wrong side, I'm going to trace, as the name implies, trace and then create the design. Trace along the lower edge. I've already traced a 2-inch gusset. I want a narrow gusset along the side to the strap area, and then mark the center. After you mark the center, then flip the template. And you're going to be working with a second layer of fabric. You'll cut out and fuse a second layer, stack the 2 layers together with obviously the trace layer on top, and then cut it out. Now you may want to cut out a piece of tissue paper using the same idea. Or if you're using a traditional pattern, you could design on that pattern. Using the template, draw circles. And you can simply place a lightweight pencil at the pivot point and then draw a circle. And make notes on this. It's too large, it's too small, move it over, whatever you'd like. But I decided this needed to be moved up. On this area, I thought some of these circles were too large. And I did all the drawings within the seam allowance. The pink lines mark the side gusset, the lower edge, and I took off 1/4 of an inch at the top. In this area is the canvas for the designing. If you prefer to do the stitching spontaneously as you go, do some marking on your fabric. This fabric has been cut out, and then do pressing. Press mark at the seam allowance. I'm pressing under the lower edge. I press the sides using within the palette area. And then I would know that this is my area where I can do all the circle stitching. So now that we've done a little planning, have the fabric interfaced, cut out, have a plan, as I have on paper. Now it's time to do the stitching. Now take a close-up look of the circular sewing attachment attached to my machine. You can see the prongs on the underside fit into the holes in the bed of the machine, and then a screw is placed in the opening. That's as simple as that. Now how this works. There's a lift lever, and you lift it to slide the gauge to the distance of the radius in millimeters. So if I would like a 55 millimeter radius circle, I'd place the little arrow at the 55 marking. There's a Y-shaped opening, and that's going to be the opening for the pivot pin. And then there's a release button that I'll press later on after I'm done sewing to remove the pivot pin. As far as setting up your machine, I've decided to work with the feather stitch. I've kept the length and the width, keeping the width and the length as it was designed on the machine, and then slightly loosening the tension. After the machine has been set with decorative embroidery thread, rayon embroidery thread, and then also bobbin fill in the bobbin, measure on your pattern piece where you'd like to have the circle. And I've measured that it's 4 1/4 inches from the lower edge as well as the same from the side edge. On my fabric, I've placed the push pin at that measurement. I also added an additional stabilizer, a no-show fusible mesh to the underside. The push pin was put at that 4 1/4 mark and then placed into the Y marking and snap into place. The presser foot is raised, so I can simply slide the fabric underneath the width, lower the presser foot, and stitch. Now, of course, you would have done some sample stitching just the way that I did to choose the thread, to choose the stitch, but you just let the machine do the stitching. It automatically goes around in a circle. Now, when it's time to sew a very large circle, perhaps the 130 millimeter radius circle, you may want to smooth the fabric as you're going, but for these smaller circles, just let the machine stitch. You can see why open stitches work well, so you don't have to guide to get them adjusted just perfectly. A satin stitch is ideal, and I'm especially fond of the feather stitch. Then to do the next size, let's say I'd like to reduce it to the 35 millimeter in radius size, I'll simply cut the threads. Then on the underside, I'll again find the release and move it to 35. Lower the presser foot and do the sewing. Now you may want to change your stitch at this point, but I'm doing this just to show you how easy the circular sewing attachment works. While this is sewing, another option is to work with an applique. And the applique fabric is placed down first, stitched with a smaller seam allowance, and then trimmed away, and the fabric is restitched with a wider seam allowance. I hope that you enjoyed learning how to create perfect circles using Baby Lock's circular sewing attachment. To learn more about the products used in this video, along with my favorite sewing machines, visit a participating Baby Lock retailer. Ask about the specials from this video, and then tell them Nancy sent you.